Hey, and we are back. I want to jump in as we're talking to the wonderful and incredible Laurel Portié, and we will talk a little bit about what it looks like. Is it ads? Is it organic? Is it this or is it that? And have a real talk conversation around what this looks like. But first and foremost, thank you so much for being our guest here today, Laurel.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm always happy to jam with you.
I love it. You and I were chatting a little bit before we got on here, but I think there's so much conversation. And it's funny because I'm like the queen of organic, and that's like where I thrive. And I feel like you're the queen of ads, even though you have so much background in organic as well. What would you say? There's a lot of people who are saying it's either this or it's that, and they're making it very one-sided. I'd love to hear your thoughts and where you take stake in that process and what you think really is important for people to understand when it comes to organic and ads.
Yep, absolutely. And I think that that's a very dangerous statement anytime people say it should be either or, because one of the main takeaways that I think, just starting this episode out with a bang, is the one takeaway that I want you guys to get from this is that ads are literally just organic content with money on it. And if you start looking at advertising as just getting that one piece of content out in front of more people, it's like a little mindset shift. It shouldn't be just organic, because I feel like a lot of people who say you should just do organic, they're missing out on so many of the benefits that actually make ads super profitable. And so it's not an either or, it's about, and I know you and I are going to talk about this, it's about building an ecosystem that actually works together on a budget that actually fits with what is right in your business right now.
And I think you mentioned something really important, right? It's about it, and I always say it's like taking organic and amplifying it, and it's really that's the same thing that you're sharing. And I think so many people skip ahead. And I know you and I have had this offline conversation a bit about it. But what do you see as being big factors people need to have in place in order for them to start running ads and seeing a good return on investment in what they're doing? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, what I'm about to say is going to be a little controversial only because it goes against what everyone in marketing is saying, because a lot of people in marketing say it's all about the offer. I say it's actually all about positioning. And if you look at your content as a way to position what you're actually good at, you actually don't need a quote offer. Why? Because if I'll actually back up and put it to you in a very easy way, right? Whenever I first started, I went live every single day, no ads, just live video, teaching people how to do the ads that I was launching at the television station that I was currently working with, right? And I went live every single day. All of those people, I never made offers to them. They would just say, "Hey, Laurel, can you do that for me?" I was positioning myself as an expert. And so a lot of people think that, oh, it's all about the offer, but it's actually, in my opinion, more about positioning than it is actually about an offer. Because I think people spend so much time trying to get that 1 to 2 sentence offer out there. And by actually doing that, it's actually getting them almost backwards instead of moving forwards. And even in my brand new book, it's called Super Duper Profitable Ads, I actually walk people through the step-by-step plan that I actually did for myself when I first launched, that all started with organic. But then I proceed to tell them, hey, if I was using the advice that I'm giving you guys right now, if I would have just threw $5 on those live videos, I would have gotten where I am a lot faster. And so I laugh about that, but I literally got to $2 million without that 1 to 2 sentence offer that everyone tells you that you have to have. And so as you're going and producing this content, start thinking about what is a way that I can position myself as an expert instead of making all of these guarantees and promises to people.
I love that. And it's funny, it aligns so much with what I teach too, because we teach method-based selling, right? It's not an offer. And I think that so much of marketing and the biggest unlearning process we have to give our clients is we're not teaching you offer-based marketing. And I agree where so many people are so focused on the offer that they believe that if their offer isn't perfect, that nothing else will work. And I always tell them it's almost the reverse. It's literally how clear are we with our method, with our messaging, with our positioning, being able to communicate all those things. And then the offer becomes secondary because it's really just a way to plug the problem, right? Solve the problem. And realistically, if you've positioned yourself appropriately, and in our case, we talk about innovation and really focusing on that methodology, if you've been able to do that appropriately, they won't care what the offer is. That's the easiest piece of the puzzle. I could come to you and be like, listen, I know that you're really good at getting my name out there and not really care about the offer, the perfect offer. I think I stand behind you on that too. And it's funny because you see all these big name people who are like, the offer is the nail in the coffin of what's going to get you there. And it's so totally the opposite. So I love that you shared that. So when it comes to running those ads, knowing that you're like, listen, the offer isn't the most important aspect of that, are there, like, let's say 2 or 3 things that you think you look for somebody to have in place so that their ads can be the most successful as quickly as possible? Because obviously that's what people always want. Tell me what you think people should have in place to really successfully run ads. And maybe it's nothing, I don't know.
It's really one thing. You just have to be an expert. You have to have an expertise in something, right? And that's actually a huge one because I know that there's a lot of people that are being taught that what they have is an expertise, or they've taken a course and then all of a sudden they're an expert in something, but you truly have to be really good at what you do. And I'll give you a plain example just from my own experience. So I worked for CBS. I started working in television in 2002. So I did the nightly news. If you Google me, everyone will know the story, so I won't go into it. But I got really great at that one thing of these hooks that got people's attention. And when social media came around in 2008, my boss was like, hey, can we translate what you're doing to get people across these commercial breaks into watching the news? How do we use that the same headlines and promises of value to get people to pay attention to us on social media when they have so many different ways to get social out there? And so so that was a skill that I worked up from 2002 to 2018 when I started going live online. But one of the things that we had also mixed into it was Facebook advertising in 2008. And so I was utilizing Facebook ads in order to get our content in front of people. And so the ecosystem that I teach business owners today is literally an ad strategy that I built to get more eyeballs on these news programs and television shows that we were launching. And so when I went live for the first time, I didn't know squat about sales funnels. I didn't know squat about sales processes and all of that. I went live with something that I knew best. We were using these $5 ads to put content in front of the right people that was going to grab their attention and just really dominate the news feed. And so that's what I went live with. I didn't have an offer. I didn't know that I was going to do ads for people or that it was going to grow into this huge business. But all it took was me going live and sharing what I was an expert in, even though I don't really consider myself an expert, but what I was really good at and what I had worked on for almost 20 years. And it turned into all of this. And so if there's anyone listening right now thinking you need all of this stuff, you don't. I literally made my first $200,000 online by just utilizing Facebook Live, Google Documents, Zoom calls, and a PayPal link. It costs $0. And so hopefully I know I went a roundabout answer to that question, but I really want people to really realize how simple it is to get your own slice of this internet marketing pie.
Yeah. And we always say simple scales. I'm always like, simple is going to be your fastest thing to scaling. And I think people overcomplicate the crap out of it. And then they wonder why things aren't working. But the more complicated it becomes, the more breaking points there are in the process. And it's take it simple. And then you can like add derivatives to it and add different pieces to it. I guess my question to you is because I know people are naturally going to be asking that. I think a lot of people struggle to identify for themselves what that thing is that is like their thing. And I think a lot of people, it doesn't matter how long you've been in business. And a lot of our clients have been in business 10 plus years, they're still trying to nail, well, what's my thing? What's the thing I'm really good at? Any advice you can give to those people who maybe are still trying to figure that piece out?
Yeah. And this is just my 2 cents. And I think that any key to success is you have to truly love what you do. I think so many people are trying to force something that they just really don't love just because it makes money. I truly get up, and my students always ask me this, Laurel, why do you put out so much content, you do this? And I'm like, I truly freaking just love what I do. And my wife sometimes even gets mad because sometimes I'm in my office all day and aren't you tired of? I'm like, no, like it doesn't feel like work. And so
Yeah.
you have to you have to have a passion for what you're doing, whether you've been doing it for a year or 3 years, 20 years, but you have to truly pick something that you're going to stick with. Because one of the things that I do see people, and I'll give a really direct example. I had a couple of people that were in my program whenever I first started the Lean on Laurel program 2 or 3 years ago. And I had 2 people who were in the program and they weren't able to get the results that they wanted because they were not really good at what they did, right? Like
Yep.
You know what I'm talking about. And everyone who's listening knows what we're talking about, right? They just weren't really good. And what they did was they pretty much decided Laurel is really great at ads. I'm going to take her system and I'm going to sell that.
Ugh.
And their second business didn't work either because that wasn't something that they're truly passionate about. And so I know all of these people are like, you have to go with what people want and what people buy. I get that to a certain extent, but to truly excel at this online stuff, whether it's videos and marketing, you have to really, at the end of the day, love what you're doing, because you're going to have to do it for 12, 14 hours a day until you get things, until you get things going.
And I think there's a couple points in there that I'm like, one, I totally feel you, by the way. My husband's always go take a self-care day. I'm like, my business is self-care for me. Like, it is the most exciting piece of the puzzle. Another thing that I was like, when you were saying it, my light bulbs were going off, is everyone always asks me, why do you still take sales calls? And I'm like, because there is like an exchange that happens when I'm on a call where I can actually tell you, yes, this person's going to make it or not, due to the fact, like, how convicted are they? How much passion do they have? And do they have innovation? And I think it's so easy to just take on clients or do whatever just because like we can make money. And at the same time, for me, it's the same thing where there's got to be an energy exchange of, do I believe that you have what it takes? Do I believe that you care about what you're doing? And do you have something that's innovative? I think one of the things that you mentioned that I think is so important is positioning, again, by the way, where you were like, yeah, it's about how you sell something to people, what they want. But the reality is there is a market for anything. There's literally not anything that you can put out there. And I've had clients who are soccer coaches, relationship coaches, like everything. There is a market for anything that you're putting out there when you understand that market, when you understand the opportunity in that. And I think a lot of people don't know that. So they go backwards and they see these gurus who are talking about their hundreds of thousands of dollars each month, and they're like, I just want that. So they gravitate towards that rather than honing in on, here's what I do really well. Then how can I position this to the right people in the right way, gets them to make the decision that they want. And I think that's, again, one of those concepts that's so difficult for people to like really zone in on, because it's so much easier to jump. And I've seen coaches, I have so many clients, and you've probably experienced the same thing, who come in and they're like, I was told by so-and-so coach or so-and-so coach that I have to sell to money, wealth. Like, there's this like I can only sell to these three things and that's it. And it's so frustrating to watch, because yes, we get it that there's some very innate things that go into it. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if we're selling the wrong thing, if we're not in it for the right reasons, there's no way to get to where you want to go. And I think one of the things you and I have a lot of conversations about that I think will be a good segue into ecosystems is there is a level of patience. There is a level of like, how badly do you want this? And how much can you see that bigger vision? And you and I have this conversation all the time about our clients and like students who are coming in, and really being able to get them to realize, and I say this all the time, it's not going to be easy. Is it going to be worth it? Like, how much of that are you buckled in for? What do you see on your end? Like we said, again, people who are coming in and running ads and they're doing so successfully, there is that level of, like you said, expertise, and then being patient and looking at the ecosystem. Tell us a little bit more about that side of it too.
Gosh, I could talk about people being patient all freaking day long. Like, one of the biggest things that I see with people is they are really not patient. And this is something that I make it absolutely clear, is that if you're going to work with me, we have to get 90 days to data. It's not 90 days to success. And I'm very upfront about it, because there's so many of these programs that promise these certain levels of success after 90 days. Yes, if you're taking someone who has had a lot of success in an expertise, yes, you can get results in 90 days. But for most of the people who are out here it's not going to work that way. And a lot of people just don't have the patience to sit and wait. And I'll give you a great example. His name is Scott Perry. He's one of my favorite success stories to talk about. And he worked for Seth Godin as one of his coaches, success coaches, for many years. And he came to me when his son and his daughter-in-law just had a baby, and they were looking for a babysitter. And Scott was like, you know what? I think I want to start my own consulting business, and I just need to make enough to live comfortably and be able to be a babysitter for my grandson.
Cool.
And so I walked him through the process. I was like, here's what it's going to look like for the first 90 days. We're going to put out content. We're going to get people to raise their hand for these value bombs. I call them value bombs, which are literally just lead magnets without an email address, asking people for an email address. And we're just going to talk to people and we're going to see what they want. And by the end of the 90 days, he had put out over 80 something pieces of content. He had over 500 messenger conversations with people. He was able to bring a certain percentage of those people into the messenger conversation, but he was only closing 4% of them on the sales call.
Wow.
So 90 days, I literally, and my students get really mad at this. I'm like, you go and count every single post, every single messenger conversation, every little thing, because here's where the magic happened. Okay. I had him go back and count, and we saw 2 possible levers that we could pull in the next 90 days.
Yep.
Because he had the data from the first 90 days, he had 2 options. One, he could create more content and have twice as many messenger conversations that would involve twice as many sales calls to increase the amount of people, right? Or over the next 90 days, we could work just simply on his sales calls and take that 4% to 20%, and boom, he's tripled his income by just working on that one thing. But a lot of people are not patient enough to get the data from that 90 days, because honestly, all of this stuff is just a freaking big math problem.
Yeah. And I love that you say that, because we have that conversation all the time where it's all about looking at it holistically. And I think that the problem becomes, and I want to shine a light on this because you and I both do this a little bit differently, is that I think there's so many people who are only fixing one piece of the puzzle because that's what they're being told, right? They're coming into a program or support in some way, coming in saying, oh, all you needed was more leads. And I think that becomes the biggest problem, or all you needed was better sales calls. All you need, and I always tell people, if anyone gives you all you needed thing, I'm like, that's a huge red flag to me, because it's really never one piece of the puzzle. And I know nobody wants to hear that because they want it to be this like easy button, like the Staples easy button and all that, but it's not. It is knowing those pieces, those levers within the process, and being able to say, where can I move things? How can I optimize those to create those better results? And in that case, that's a perfect example. We do the same thing where we tell our clients, you need to be able to track how many pieces of content did you put out? How many inbound conversations did that create? How many of those inbound conversations did you make offers to? How many offers then turned into every freaking piece of that puzzle is outlined. And at the end of the day, that is going to give them faster results because they're going to be able to long-term know when and where to make the right moves. I think it's so damaging in the industry, and I feel so frustrated over it. And I'm sure you see the same side of it. So many people who come in and they're like, I just need this one thing. And realistically, you're like, no, I wish it was like that, but it's not. What do you see on that end? Like, I know for a fact, because I know how ads work and all that fun stuff. I'm sure a lot of people come in and just think, oh, I'm going to turn on ads and my whole business is going to be fixed. Tell us a little bit more about that, and what do you experience, and what's the reality behind that? And talk a little bit about your ecosystem around it.
Yeah. So this is so funny. So I was just at TNC because one of my besties, Vince Reed, was speaking, and he gave me a ticket. And I had never been to a big event. I had only up until this point been to a lot of small mastermind events. I had never been to a big event like Traffic and Conversions or Funnel Hacking Live. This was my first like experience. And one of the biggest observations that I had sitting in a room with a whole bunch of people was that all of these people who have conversion issues were sitting in rooms learning new shiny objects like chatbots and lead generation stuff, when at the end of the day, what they really needed was conversion mechanisms to help them get more conversions. And as internet marketers, I think that's what everyone thinks that they need. Most of the people listening right now don't need more leads. Like, most of the people listening to this episode right now either need more sales calls or being able to convert from conversations onto a sales call.
Yeah.
Most of the market listening to this right now, one of those 2 things is the problem. And what I love about my ecosystem, because a lot of people mistake my ecosystem, they think that my ecosystem replaces a direct response marketing tool like a webinar or anything like that. But in reality, my ecosystem is built around it. I'll give you a perfect example. So one of my clients, she was sending people to a VSL. And for 2.5 years, every single month, she was 6 figures, 6 figures, 6 figures, right? All of a sudden, she was getting the same amount of leads coming through her funnel, But what we were noticing was her watch rate was dropping. So people were still opting in, but they weren't moving forward and watching the VSL, which in turn they weren't seeing her offer. And so what I did was I was like, you know what? How could I capitalize on all of these leads that my client has already paid for? So what I did was I had her break down her VSL into 3 PDFs. So
Mm.
what are the 3 main points of the PDF? Because obviously people are interested in the information, but they just weren't getting to the VSL. And I had her shoot 3 reels videos, 60-second reels, holding up those PDFs and saying, "Hey, this is for every woman who's got an egg retrieval coming up. Here are the 3 secrets to being able to do that." And we just literally went down the line. I turned on a $5 ad to that reel where women were raising their hand for that, I call it a value bomb. Some people would call it a lead magnet, but to me, the difference is it's not gated.
Gated.
It's somewhat, I'm just blowing them a value bomb in Messenger, right? They don't have to give me anything in return. That's why I call it a value bomb. But a whole bunch of women raised their hand. And the next day, my client calls me and she's like, "I don't know what you did, but I think we need to turn off the ads because we got over 200 triage calls booked on a
Wow.
$6 ad." That's all we had. We had only spent $6 through the 3 Reels ads, over 200 triage calls. That is the power of my ecosystem, because a lot of people think that, oh, it's to replace a VSL. No, it's actually to pull people through bottom of the funnel. So my power content strategy, for those of you guys who don't know, these are 3 to 5 minute videos that we run to cold traffic, right? It builds something that's called an invisible list. So in Naz's case, right, she runs lead generation to her 4-part bingeable video series, right? The Netflix methodology. So she's sending cold traffic to that landing page. What's your opt-in rate? 30, 40% of
40%, yeah.
If people land on that landing page and they don't opt in, let's use the ecosystem to capitalize on those clicks that you've already paid for. So let's send 60% of the people who didn't opt in to your power content videos, which, by the way, could be the same 4 videos that you're using in your bingeable series, right? So we're going to feed them the content one way or another.
Different way.
One side is building the regular list, right? You're getting their name, you're getting their email, you can see them. The other side, the power content, because it's a video on Facebook, Facebook is storing that data, but we cannot see the data on these people. So that's why I call it an invisible list. So we're actually using cold traffic to build both a physical list and an invisible list, but we're also plugging that first black hole of the funnel, which is the people who didn't opt in. So boom, that's the first part of the ecosystem. What's the second black hole? After people opt in. So let's create some content middle of funnel that we can send to the leads that have opted in but didn't move to the application process. Let's put a string of so my ecosystem, all I'm doing is using content to plug holes of the funnel. And so it works really well. And so that's why, like, my students often see 30 to 40 times their return on ad spend. How many people can say they can get 30 to 40 their ad spend, right? And so that's how the ecosystem works. It's literally just built around a direct response marketing funnel. But for those who are new, you omit the funnel, you figure out which of your content pieces and value bombs are converting, get all of those conversations, validate the offer, bada bing, bada boom, build the funnel around all the you've already validated. So that's what's actually in the book, is the beginner version of actually putting everyone through these messenger conversations. But what that does is, if you have 100 messenger conversations a week, which is the KPI, right? That's 400 messenger conversations every single month. Do you not think that you can make a shit ton of money by just doing that, right? And then you build the automated funnel, your bingeable Netflix series, around the content that performed the best. And now you could actually build a funnel that's already been
validated.
But all I'm doing is taking students from the very basic ecosystem to validate their offer through conversations. And then boom, let's automate it. And now we can actually send people through to a list building lead generation tool with the ecosystem already in place. Because here's the thing, you've already validated the ecosystem. It's already in place. Go turn on that funnel. It's going to catch all of those leads that everyone just lets
fall through the cracks. And I'm guessing that obviously their top of funnel ad spend is going to be so much lower too, because they validated it more rather than spending to validate, which I think becomes that tough issue that a lot of people were like, oh, I don't want to do this. Cause, and I want to ask you this question because I see it on my end when we do a very similar thing where I tell people you have to get to a point where you have a certain number of inbound conversations coming in first before we decide to automate. And it pisses people off because they're like, no, I just want to skip to the automation.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, that's going to be an expensive, whether you're spending with time or you're spending with money, doesn't make a difference. You're going to make this expensive because you haven't validated your messaging on the top of funnel to ensure that when people come in, it is actually saying, yes, I want this, and creating that demand, and then being able to understand how to take that demand and convert it, then automate it. And I think, what would you have to say around that? Because I have a lot to say around this, and I get a lot of clients who actually get really pissed off when I'm like, listen, I don't accept them, for example, in the Sustainable Profit Academy, where we teach the Netflix effect. When we do the bingeable sales system, I say, we can't do that until you have a certain level of inbound demand already come in. If you don't have inbound demand, it's a waste of time and money for us to skip into building out this great system that you don't have any demand for. And what's the point of that? So what do you have to say about that? Because I feel like it's just a frustrating thing.
We're 100% aligned. Honestly, you and I teach almost the same exact thing, except I just accelerate it with a low
ads.
budget ads. Most of my students are spending $300 to $500 a month to get $10,000 to $11,000 a month. But that's good because they don't want to grow. Like most of my clients are solopreneurs. Like they don't want to build these great teams, and so like they can operate at a lower ad budget. But it works even better. So I had a very popular internet marketer come into my LOL program, and I showed him the ecosystem because he was just doing a lot of direct response marketing. Within the first weekend, he recovered over 6 figures in revenue because he was only running the direct response version.
Yeah.
But we're able to, in a lot of cases, like one of my agency clients, the one that I was talking about, once we installed the ecosystem, we were able to bring, she was making $50,000 to $60,000 by spending $10,000 to $11,000 with another agency. I put in my ecosystem, and within 2 months, we were able to bring her ad spend down to $5,700 a month, and she had her first 6-figure month at $121,000. So we actually doubled her conversions while cutting her ad spend in half, because the ecosystem has this compounding effect. Like whenever I made my first $1 million, I had spent less than $30,000 in ad spend. Now we're almost at $3 million, and I still have barely spent $100,000 in ads because of the compound effect.
Yeah. It's funny, we talk about the same thing. I call it compounding validation, same process, where on the back end of ours, what we do is we have like mini content funnels. Once people come into your world, whether it's through the Benchable, whatever, we have a different top of funnel process. But then once they're in there, we have these like mini content funnels that essentially are replicating the same process people go through when they're going through a decision-making thing, but on different angles. So it's interesting because that's exactly what we say. We're always like, listen, you can either churn through more leads and just like literally be pushing more leads into your ecosystem and not be getting the conversions you want, which means no matter what. And I always tell people, in a way, it's almost not scalable when we do it that way, because when you do it that way, your ad cost or your time cost is consistently going to go up in order to hit higher numbers, which means there's always going to be this like off balance piece, right? Versus what if and I had a client, for example, we shut off ads. We were like, let's just turn off ads for a little bit, focus on getting the right messaging, the right positioning, and then pushing them through this process. She shut off ads, and same thing. It was like 6-figure month. And all of a sudden it was, again, it wasn't a leads problem. It wasn't recognizing that. It was realizing that it's really about the ecosystem and how we catch them on the back end of it. So I would love to hear your take on this, because you mentioned like on the back end, if somebody doesn't opt into the direct response piece at the top, how do you determine what kind of content you're putting in front of them, and what is the key intent behind that to create that conversion? What are we trying to do with that piece so that we can capture it? Tell me a little bit more about that.
100%. And I love it. And it goes back to, which by the way, I still do this strategy. Like a lot of people, I don't have a funnel. I still to this day do not have a funnel, because I just make sure that whatever I'm doing, I get 100 messenger conversations a day. So for anyone who thinks I've graduated and moved on, I still do it, because guess what? It's the thing that got me here, and it's the thing that's taken me to the to the next level, right? And so you have to look at all of the conversations that you've had, because it all goes back to I always tell students there's a method to my madness. The reason that I have them do all of these messenger conversations is so that we already know why people aren't moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're having 100 messenger conversations a week, you already know, and you could actually link, oh, this is a common thing I hear. This is a common thing I hear. This is a common thing I hear. I have this sequence that I call the hot 7,
Okay.
and we strategically build the hot 7 for people who have engaged, watched the entire, and I'll just keep using your example, your bingeable Netflix series, but they haven't booked a call yet.
Mm-hmm.
So all of those hot 7 has its own little piece of, I call conversion content. And so this is going to be content with case studies, because there's always one or two reasons that people don't
Mm-hmm.
buy, right? Number one, they don't believe it works, which is
Yep.
easy to show them testimonials and case studies. Number two, they don't have certainty that it will
Mm.
work for them. They believe that it works for other people, but they don't have the
Not for
certainty that
them.
it can work for them. And so the hot 7 content has to be focused on, how could I give this person, one, complete clarity, but two, more importantly, certainty that this will work for them. And so this is one of the reasons why people tell me, Laurel, all your content can be found on YouTube. I don't have, no one has to pay for my content. And the reason being is because so many people like, and it just literally follows your method just without it being behind a gated piece.
Yeah.
It's, I want people to binge watch my
Yeah.
stuff. By the
Fall in love
time
with
that
you.
they come to me, and this works, and that's why I love your concept so much, is because we're, like I said, we're both doing the same thing. Like, it's just like small tactical things. I hate email, so I don't put an email. Like, I don't build
Yeah.
an email,
Not
but
worth it
that's
to
a
you.
personal
Yeah.
preference. I fucking hate email. I hate writing them. I hate getting them. I haven't even looked at emails in the last, since March of 2021. But at the end of the day, it's, we have to know exactly what our audience, why they're not moving forward.
Yep.
And so it's all about just, how do I convince someone? Because by the time that they get to me after binge watching all of my stuff, they're already sold. They're messaging me and, hey, what's the link for a lean on Laurel?
Yes.
I never have to sell.
Yes.
I always tell my students, if people put me on a cold call with someone I don't know, I would be awful at sales. I really would. My comfort level is, I like a long marketing process and a
Uh-huh.
short sales process, where a lot of people
Mm.
like the triage call and then the strategy call and then all
Uh-uh.
of these things. I like people just sending me a message saying,
Yes.
hey, what's the link to LOL?
Yes. Yes. First of all, we can even shorten that, but yes, but the bingeable factor, and the fact that, and I always call it guided stalking. What we're essentially doing when we talk about bingeability before that, and getting people to the fact that short sales cycle where you're not even selling. And I tell people, it's not a matter of being better at sales. It's a matter of being better at marketing so that you don't actually have to sell. Sure, you could be I call it a sales ninja, like someone who just jumps on calls and is really freaking good at it. But for 90% of us, that's not us, or we don't want to operate in that route. And we don't want to feel like we're convincing or pressuring people. And so much of it really is, can I give people the right information that allows them to make a decision as quickly as possible for them? And one of the things that you mentioned, like we said, we talk about bingeability, we talk about getting people to there. It's presenting the right information in the right order in the right way. And I think it is easy to like gloss over that and be like, oh, it's just about putting content out. But there's a method to the madness. There's pieces that go together. And like when we talk about the bingeable process, we're looking at bingeability on the front end and the back end. So we do the same very similar thing, where it's, let me get you to binge on the front end quickly so that you do create a level of buy-in immediately. And then great, yeah, a lot of people don't purchase. I call them mid-intent. They're like not quite there. And I talked about this in a couple episodes back, where we talked about like a closed loop system. Rather than churning through these leads and then wondering, what the hell, why is it always expensive, or why am I not getting the level of conversions I want? It's, how do we then, again, like we said, support people in that middle area and understanding, why do they not buy? What's the problem? What information do they need to make that decision? And then again, mimicking that process for them. I think the biggest thing, and I really want to highlight this because I love that you're on the same boat as me in this conversation, is that you have to be willing to do some of that heavy lifting on the front end. Like, it's frustrating. And I get a lot of people are like, I don't want to spend time in the DM conversations. I'm like, great, then you're going to spend time on the back end one way or another. That time is going to be necessary. It's how you want to allot your time so that I get faster results. And that's really what we're ultimately looking for. And so one of the big things, I had a client who, she teaches French, and she was the same way. She came in and she was like, okay, let's do this. And we had generated so many leads. I think she had counted, and it was like 328 DM conversations had been started in a short period of time. And she was like, but I need to up my conversions. I was like, okay, great. What we needed to get to this point, because then we could sit there and really outline where people were moving and people weren't, and make those shifts. And then literally within 30 days, it was like we took all the data that we had from that, turned it around, and all of a sudden she was like selling like hotcakes. But again, I think people have to be willing to hear, and I want to say it from people who are leading in this and understanding that it does require effort. It does require putting pieces in place and being able to read that data, understand that data, and synthesize it to making the right decisions. And then again, then creating the longevity behind that, whether that's choosing to automate it or bring team on or whatever that might be from that information. So I love that. Anything you'd want to leave my audience with? And I do want you to share a little bit more about the next steps of where you want them to head as well. But anything you want to share with my audience before we jump off today?
You just got to get stuff done. There's this 7-day flywheel that I teach my students, and in optimizing this whole thing, because at the end of the day, every single week, I want them to be building an invisible list. And for those of you guys who want to recap, the invisible lists are the people who are watching those 3 to 5 minute videos 25% or more of the time. That's my invisible list. I want to be building a list of 500 to 1,000 every single week. On the other hand, I want to also have at least 100 messenger conversations a week. And every single day, I tell my students, day 1, do 1 video, day 2, do the next, day 3, and it's all in sequence. By the time day 7, that's when we're going and optimizing and seeing, is this video hitting the KPI? No, we're going to write, shoot, and launch a new one. Then the next day, we're going to go and look at that one. Is there an optimization point? And it's just a day-to-day process, because I think a lot of people forget, especially a lot of my students, because they see where I'm at now and they forget very, very easily that in order to get, I have 4 ads that have been running since 2020 that have been in the newsfeed for 4 years. They're still converting. They tend to forget that for 90 days, we're talking about 90 days to data, for those 90 days, every single day, I launched 2 to 3 new ads. So we're talking 180 ads to get those 4 winners.
Yep.
But because I was so focused in those 90 days, I'm still enjoying the fruits of those ads working 4 years later. And so if there's anything that anyone takes away from this, is you have to pick what is the one thing that you're going to work on, right? Because what Naz was saying earlier, there's at some point where you don't want to have so many freaking conversations, where you have to start testing a more automated way to do it. I would never have been able to have the cash flow to do that testing if I wasn't doing the hard work, the manual conversations and all of that. So many people want to automatically shut off that pipeline of leads because they're too anxious. They want to get to the automation as quick as possible. But there's 190 days where you're going to have to do both, because you're exploiting the thing that's working. And yes, it's going to be gruesome. But the other day when you're exploring, but the upside is so much greater than the downside. And you just have to be patient. I cannot stress enough. You just have to be patient. It is a volume play. I know a lot of people say it's quality over quantity. No. Whenever you need to figure out what works, you need to put out the quantity so that you can figure out what is quality to your audience.
I like that. I love that. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that with me. And we'll put some links down below of where to find Laurel, but where can people learn a little bit more? And what's the best next step if they want to learn a little bit more about adding some money to what you're doing and taking that next step?
I would recommend getting my book. It's called Super Duper Profitable Ads. It's actually still a bestseller right now on Amazon. And it's going to give them all of the information. Like it actually has like diagrams, and it even has like checklists, like day to day. Look at this. Like it literally tells you what to do day 1, day 2, day 3.
No question.
And it just walks you through like all of the diagrams, all of the organic content. It's got all of the scripts for my videos. Literally, you get this book, and it's got literally your playbook for literally everything that Naz is already teaching you guys.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for being here, guys. And Laurel, I appreciate your time. And as always, we love when you rate, subscribe, and share this episode. But until next time, here's to keeping it real.